Hi, this is Ozzie Jurock. I'm the host of OzBuzz, and today it is my privilege and pleasure to welcome His Worship, Mayor Don McCormick from Kimberley. Now, Kimberley is a town in the Rockies, and it calls itself the place to be, and you're the mayor of it. Don McCormick is joining us. Don, how do you like to be the mayor of the place to be?
Well, this is awesome. Kimberley is an absolutely awesome place, and being the mayor here has been a privilege that I've had for 4 years. Recently re-elected for a second term.
Yeah, so congratulations.
Thank you, Ozzie. I appreciate that, and I'm looking forward to the next 4 years.
Yeah, well, I think, I come here maybe 2 or 3 months a year, and I must admit that I'm not trying to sort of be brown-nosing, but things have changed since you became mayor. Actually, the road was paved up to the hill. I'm not sure that you personally did it, but there seemed to be a lot of change. The Platzel is more busy, there's new businesses. There seems to be almost like a new spirit in town.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that. We've worked, we meaning not just the elected officials, but staff at the City of Kimberley have been working really, really hard the last 4 years to move forward. Back in 2001, prior to 2001, Kimberley was a mining town.
Right.
Teck Cominco had a lead zinc mine here that was the largest in the world for about 100 years, and the ore body got mined out. So in 2001, when the mine closed, a lot of people thought that this would very quickly become a ghost town. That has not happened for a number of reasons, but what we have become is a very sought-after lifestyle community. And
with a great ski resort.
With a great ski resort. We like to say that with three championship golf courses in town,
right.
We have more golf courses than traffic lights, which is awesome. We only have one of those.
Yeah.
So it's a very special community from a lifestyle and a recreation point of view. And I think that the growth in our population this last 10 years is a testament to that.
Yeah, you also have more enrollment of kids now, which is sort of a real sign of progress.
Well, 15 years ago, schools were closing, and
yeah.
I think in the area, Kimberley and environs, there were 4 or 5 schools that had closed as people moved elsewhere for jobs, and it was a very difficult time. Today, our 2 elementary, our middle school, and our high school are full. Yeah. All of them are full. And we've sat down and tried to have a look at where that population's coming from, and it's not just one area. We've got a number of different dynamics in place, but at the core of it is making sure that as a municipality, we are offering a level of service and amenities in town that cause people to want to live here.
Well, and you do that. I met so many people that maybe moved from Surrey and found it very difficult to make the mortgage payment and come here. Prices on real estate are half or less than what they're there, and the lifestyle is, as you say, fantastic. The Rockies are great, but these Kootenay Rockies, I guess it's the Purcells really, and we're looking at the Rockies when we're on top. It's magnificent.
It truly is. It is quite a contrast. We're all in British Columbia, and yet the contrast between the Lower Mainland and many places in the interior, including the East Kootenays, is rather dramatic. Somebody from Surrey who's stressed in Surrey from a financial point of view comes to the East Kootenays and they're wealthy.
Yeah, exactly.
just by moving. So it is definitely a province of contrasts, and at this point in time, I would have to say that Kimberley, given where we are and the amenities we have, is probably the best valued community in all of British Columbia.
I don't disagree. I've been here I guess 14 years. I can't believe it, It's obviously right. There's a reason. I've been trying to retire here for 14 years, not so successfully.
Well, my wife Bev and I have been here for 16 years, and that was our ultimate goal, was to live in a place that we wanted to live in. We have an international airport that's only 15 kilometers
right.
away. And we are a gigabit community when it comes to internet and fiber connectivity. So you have those two things, and pretty much anybody, any age, can live here and not only be productive but enjoy the lifestyle.
But I'm sure it wasn't easy for Kimberley sort of to come from being a mining town. All of a sudden you're a ski resort, and it's fine, but now maybe that income from the mine also went.
Well, that's exactly right. In fact, when you take a look at any community or any municipality, it's really a bit of a two-headed beast. On one hand, you have the community, including the business community and the disposable income that everyone uses,
right.
The amenities that are used. And on the other hand, you have the business of the municipality. And in the case of Kimberley, we've got 7,500 people in town now, and we're a $27 million corporation as a municipality, the business of the city of Kimberley. And it's really important to differentiate between the two because there can be quite a contrast. So for example, right now you mentioned how buoyant things are. We have just a great vibe going on in town now.
Yeah.
We've had good tourism years back to back to back. The business community, I think if you asked any business in town, they would say that each year now is the best year that they've ever had. So with that great vibe comes a feeling of wealth, not just from a financial point of view, but from a lifestyle point of view. On the other hand, when the mine closed in 2001, the city of Kimberley overnight lost $3 million in tax revenue. That, over the last 17 years, has basically been thrust on the backs of the residential homeowners and on the retail business community we have. So we have been quite challenged to try and keep our taxes down and at the same time maintain the levels of service that we had in place when that mine was still open. And that has been an extremely difficult thing to do.
Well, it's never easy to make the taxpayer happy, but in particularly this kind of situation, you have to balance the two. You have to find the revenue somewhere else. And I think that's perhaps where your background as a mayor maybe helps a little too, because you're in the marketing kind of an area. You've been in many different kind of reinventions of yourself, and you bring with it to the job sort of a wealth of experience on the marketing side and understanding, hey, to run a city is maybe just like be the CEO of a big company.
Well, absolutely. And in fact, it's kind of interesting because if you talk to local government gurus, those that write books on, how to manage municipalities, most will say the worst thing you can do is attempt to manage the municipality like a business, like a private enterprise. And I disagree with that. I think one of the best things you can do is attempt to run it like a business, but it's really a modified business. And by that I mean that the revenues don't come from the product that you're selling, it comes from taxpayers.
Right.
And we need to respect that because if a private business needs more revenue, you go out and sell more product. If a municipality needs more revenue, the only place you have to go to is the taxpayers.
Yeah.
And the last thing
and they usually resent it.
They do indeed. And the last thing you want to do is to continually go back to the taxpayers asking for more money. So we have in British Columbia, and for that matter, probably the other provinces in Canada, we have two things that help differentiate us from a private business and look after taxpayer money, and that is the Community Charter and the Local Government Act. There are a whole host of governance things in these two governance things that make sure that we are respectful of taxpayer money and just don't go cavalierly doing things and putting it at risk. So we do have a fairly tight fence that we have to operate within, but it can in fact be done. 80% of what we do can be managed exactly the same way we manage in the private sector. That other 20% inside Community Charter and Local Government Act, we have to do things a little bit differently.
It's funny though that you say that, it can be done. There's a whole bunch of municipality and provinces and, would I dare say, federal governments who seem to think the only way to do it, keep on going, spend more money and saddle future generations with the cost.
Well, there is this tendency in government to build on what has been done before, not take a step back, break it down and say, what do we really need to do or what do we need to change? And so fundamentally 4 years ago, that's what we did here in Kimberley, as we as the elected officials and our chief administration officer got together and we discussed what our strategic priorities were going to be for the next 4 years. And we came up with a set of priorities that we would then be able to hand off to staff, and they would use that as their decision-making measurement. In other words, if we're going to spend this money or if we're going to do this, how does that relate to achieving these 5 strategic priorities that we have? If it doesn't, don't do it. Don't spend the money just for the sake of doing it. So we managed to stick pretty closely. Well, first of all, I think the key point is we had priorities and goals that were set.
Right.
And here we are 4 years later, and we've managed to make some really, really good progress on all of those fronts. Now, what's interesting is the goals that we set, the strategic priorities that we set, I should say, are very consistent with what you'd see in the private sector. Number one, at the top of the list was new revenue.
Right.
In other words, new money coming into the municipality that was not from existing taxpayers. So we need to spend more money.
What a unique concept.
Yeah, where do we get it from? So that was number one. The second was what we called financial sustainability. This was really making sure that the town stayed affordable from a taxation point of view, and we do not raise taxes any more than the rate of inflation each year.
Interesting.
We calculated what our municipal rate of inflation was, and it worked out to be about 2% a year, and we are committed to a maximum tax increase of 2% a year. If we want to spend more money on other things, we have to get that money from other places. The third priority was around infrastructure renewal. So every municipality in Canada is in tough right now with an aging infrastructure.
Sure.
Pipes in the ground, the fleet, buildings, these things have not been well looked after and are going to require an incredible investment. So we wanted to start taking a look at what that looked like and to make some inroads on that. And the other two were communication, making sure that we had an educated and a well-informed community. And the fifth was customer service, ensuring that staff at the city understood and the elected officials understood that taxpayers were our customers. They're the ones
Right.
paying the bill. And therefore, we had to respect that and make sure that we were providing them with a very high level of service. So the combination of those five strategic priorities and everything that fell out of that from an execution point of view has helped us move forward this past 4 years to the wonderful state we're in today.
Well, and of course you started off right, otherwise you wouldn't have been re-elected. The public actually saw it, it's because they could see the results. I'm not saying this, it's because, particularly since I wasn't here the full time, when you come here, all of a sudden there's a change, and you talk to people in town and everybody seems to be they have a future orientation, whereas before it was always how it used to be, 10 years ago, right?
Well, that's very true. What's interesting, during this past election in October, I received 58% of the vote, those that voted. We had a 50% turnout, and I got 58% of that. And I've had a lot of people ask me, "Wow, that was closer than what we thought it would be. Why is that?" And it's kind of interesting. I mean, first past the post means you win by one vote and you're in.
Sure.
The margin of error isn't really all that important. However, it is important to note that when you are making change, especially in a municipality where you've determined that the status quo is not good enough, when you're making change, there are lots of people that disagree with the change. Lots of people that feel alienated or left behind. And as a result of that,
have their own hobby horses.
Absolutely. And as a result of that, you find people that would rather go in a different direction. And this is the democratic process at work.
And you did very well. I mean, in Surrey, well, first of all, I think we had in Vancouver, we had 32% voter turnout, in Surrey 34%. And of that, Mayor McCallum, now I don't have it quite right probably, but no more than 38% of the 34% was the vote that he got. So you did brilliantly according to that.
It's all relative.
But sure, it is a democracy, and that's how we do it. But you hope to make the largest number of people at least comfortable with the leadership. And I think that's part of it. Your comparison of a CEO that is responsible to shareholders, I mean, if he doesn't have results, then he's going to be out. It's very simple. So as long as he stays in, he's doing something right. And I would think that goes the same for the office of the mayor, only that you seem to be sort of like a hamburger, a very thin slice of meat between two very large buns. On the one hand is the taxpayers and the people, right? On the other hand is the resources aren't all there. I'd love to talk to you briefly about, Kimberley started a few years ago before your time a project called the Sunmine. And the idea was that you were going to be power efficient. And I understand around the world they've come looking at the results or the experience that Kimberley had with the Sunmine.
So the Sunmine has been an incredible success. Basically, it was a rebranding exercise from the city of Kimberley's point of view, and EcoSmart consultants out of Vancouver, who really came up with the idea and promoted it at the city of Kimberley, wanted to get a solar facility in the sunniest place in BC and Western Canada, for that matter, and begin to take a look at how we could turn brownfields into something useful. That was kind of their core proposition in a nutshell. And it has been quite phenomenal. It's only 1 megawatt, which is not that big. It's about 4,000 solar cells.
So what does that service?
It generates about $250,000 a year in revenue.
Okay.
And it would, if it were to kind of light up the town, it would service about 250 homes.
Okay. Well.
So relatively small, but it was always intended to be a pilot. In other words, let's prove that it can work in an area like this. And then once we have proven that, we'll expand it. The fact is that the tech lands, the tech brownfield that it was built on, has room for probably 200 megawatts. So this can expand at whatever rate the market wishes it to expand. But from the city of Kimberley's point of view, at 1 megawatt, it's always been about break even. And so our plan was to get this expanded as quickly as we could to make the business case a little stronger than 1 megawatt. And in fact, we currently have a letter of intent in place with Tech to purchase the Sunmine, and hopefully they will look to expand it in the short term. And then as as market forces kind of line up behind it, we'll be able to move forward with further expansions. It's still in the city of Kimberley. It represents what I call a non-core asset. So core assets in a municipality are sewer, water, roads, garbage, core facilities like arenas and aquatic centers, that kind of thing. The Sunmine doesn't really fall into that category. So
and it also needs a certain amount. Is it two megawatts before it can be connected to the grid?
No, it's actually connected to the grid now.
Oh, okay.
And in fact, we're selling the power that it generates back to BC Hydro.
Okay, good.
And that's where the $250,000 in revenue comes from each year. The issue is that as a non-core asset, we never want the taxpayers to be in a position of having to subsidize it from an operational point of view. And so we needed an exit strategy. And with all non-core assets, well, let me take a step back. There is no private money on the face of the planet that would have built this 1 megawatt facility. It cost $5.4 million, and the return for the amount of revenue it's generating is probably, return on capital is probably 20 years. And there is no private money other than a philanthropist probably that would put money into that kind of thing.
Still, it needed to be done, right? You want to prove something, you have to do the investment. Right?
Exactly, and that's why the city of Kimberley stepped up to be the primary driver behind this effort. So now we're in a position of exercising an exit strategy so that we have the asset, we'll continue to have the asset, but we won't have taxpayer money that is put in harm's way. This is a natural evolution. A lot of people say, well, if it's been so successful, why are you selling it? And it's not quite that simple. It has to be successful from a financial point of view long term in order for the city to consider hanging on. And quite frankly, even if it were successful financially, I think I would still be looking at divesting us of that particular asset. We have several others in town. We own a golf course, we own a conference center, we own a campground. All of these assets are great assets, but they're not core to what we're doing. And at a time when we need money, we need to be able to divest of these assets, take the cash, be able to build our infrastructure back up, do the things we need to do that's outside of asking for more taxpayer money.
Yeah, that is such a unique, I think, such a unique philosophy by a mayor. I think when I look at Vancouver, the property taxes are up 5% this year. Everything is up at an incredible rate. I was on a Michael Campbell show recently, and we quoted one of the biggest appraisal houses in the country, and they looked at the cost of a condominium on Cambie Street, which was, you'll laugh at that, but $880,000 for a two-bedroom condo, and they felt that the city if they weren't involved, there would have been 220,000 less. That's on one unit, which
Amazing.
is a joke here, because I mean 200,000 buys you a reasonable house, a 300,000 a fine house, right? And certainly all sorts of condominiums.
Yeah.
So, but no, it is it's remarkable the way you look at that. You looked at other sources of revenue as well, you know, including at one time, I'm not sure whether I'm allowed to say this, but you were going to look at bringing in a prisoner of some sort. No?
Well, I think I think the key thing, you know, a federal institution was one of the ideas that was thrown around about 4 years ago. Not much has moved forward with respect to that specific idea, but what it did was got people thinking outside their comfort zone on what was possible. One of the projects that the city is trying to support as much as we can right now is a group that is looking to bring an international student campus to Kimberley.
Oh, great!
We've had international students coming to this area since 1981, and in the last few years, it's being constrained because we don't have any seats at the high school. The high school is full, and so international students or international education as a business is constrained. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at this international business as an industry and working with this company to raise money to build this campus. It will be, when it's fully built out, phased out through all phases, it'll be about a $40 million project. And $40 million in an area like ours, that's probably more investment than Kimberley has seen since Tech Cominco was building fertilizer plants. So that's been a very, very long time.
No, and it's a very good project. I mean, we're looking at in the Lower Mainland 140,000 students. Mr. Trudeau has allowed that it's almost unlimited, and the numbers could be anywhere upwards of 500,000 students coming. They usually, I know in the city of Surrey, one of the developers, we actually interviewed him on OzBuzz, Sharan Sethi. He's now building a huge tower on King George Highway that's aiming to have an international student population living in it, because you know they do like to be in a smaller town there as well, if they're not in the big downtown center. Right.
Well, the group that's been bringing people here that's behind this is a company called AQG out of China, and so the money for this is right now is being attempted to be raised in China. About 150 of the 450 students will be from China, and this is a very attractive area because parents know that the kids will learn English here.
Right.
If kids go to the Lower Mainland, you end up in a very large Chinese community, and they don't learn English, certainly not as quickly as they need to. So by moving into an area like this, the focus is on the international education, and this is very exciting for the educational authorities in China.
Well, and then you have a safe community. It's a beautiful community. There's so much going for it. I mean, from a sports point of view, whether you're bicycling or running or walking or anything that you want to do, you can do here. One of the thoughts that I had on the ski resort itself, is that a benefit to the city?
Absolutely. I mean, the resorts of the Canadian Rockies who operate it employ in the neighborhood of 400 people during ski season. Something less than that in the summertime, but RCR also owns Trickle Creek Golf Course. They've got a big food and beverage business. And as of a year ago, January, this past January, I should say, the city completed an operating agreement for RCR to operate our conference center as well.
Great. Yeah.
So they have a year-round vested interest and lots of employees. In fact, they are the biggest employer in town.
So that worked out well then, because it not always does. But I'm a skier. I love this particular resort. I love the way it's situated and what you look at. And I like the amenities of it. RCR also owns some real estate that it intends to develop. So
absolutely, and not to forget the source of income for the city, taxes. RCR are also the single biggest taxpayer that we have in Kimberley as well.
And it's growing, isn't it? The ridership.
They've had RCR as a private company don't release specific figures, but I do have it on good authority that last year was best year ever. So it in fact has been trending up over the years, and hopefully we'll get another couple of feet of snow here.
Yeah.
Well, let me rephrase that. 30 to 50 centimeters worth of snow.
Well, the funny thing is, even Whistler 2 weeks ago, this is now the middle of December, 2 weeks ago Whistler didn't have much snow. I think this last weekend it was a little bit better, but there was a lot of long faces, everybody's waiting for the powder, to come.
El Nino.
Well, the funny thing is, I look at my veranda here, and I've always had icicles come down. I've even seen some icicles go up. But right now the icicles actually have turned and are going sideways. I've never seen anything like it. And it's this combination of cold weather, then it gets warm and just enough for them to turn, and it gets cold again, they freeze overnight, and now we have this. I put it on Instagram, so it had to be something very famous. Anyway, so you enjoy yourself in being the mayor with all the challenges?
Yeah, it has been. It's definitely a very challenging job, but I think the biggest challenge I've had, Ozzie, is trying to educate the community on what the job of mayor is about.
Right.
I don't run the municipality. The chief administration officer runs the municipality. My job as the mayor is to look at where we need to be or where we are going to be in 5 years and 10 years down the road, and ensure, working with council, that we're doing the things we need to do today in order to make that happen. So I'm basically the chief salesman for the city. I'm definitely promoting to developers and builders and all sorts of folks that are going to have an impact on our path forward.
Yeah, and that is so important. You have to have somebody that is that has some passion. And I've seen you in action. You're passionate about the city. There's nothing that you don't know. And your commitment is totally. Your wife, Bev, as an interior designer, is involved. You're both involved in the Rotary. And I know Bev has been the president of the Rotary. You're always raising funds or doing something great for the city. So you have my full admiration. Do you have sort of some final thoughts for anybody that might want to run for a municipal election?
Well, I think when we moved here in 2002, I had no intention whatsoever of being an elected official. I have never done anything like this before. It just was not even on the radar screen. However, what you discover when you get to a small community like this is that there are always need for volunteers. There's always need for skill, knowledge, and experience that we bring to these communities. And you can't just sit back and complain about the way things are. You need to get involved. And I started one year by running for council. Well, I had all of my volunteer stuff, but then I ran for council one year and discovered very quickly that councillors don't have a large impact. It's a governance role. And the only way you can have an impact on the future direction is really as mayor. And so I made the decision to step up and do that, and here we are. So I guess my counsel and best advice is that when you move to a smaller community for lifestyle purposes, make sure you get involved. The community needs it, and it's extremely rewarding.
Well, and these is good advice, and I think Kimberley itself is unique to me because every car stops. If they just see you put one foot on the road, everybody stops. Even the deer walk at the traffic light. They seem to wait for the light to change. I'm sure it's all due entirely to your leadership. Thank you so much for those kind words of advice and sharing a little bit about what it means to be His Honor the Mayor of Kimberley. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Ozzie. I appreciate it.